Nu går lyden igennem. Goddag alle sammen. Jeg hedder Nils Jensen og er direktør i organisationen Danske Museer og har fornøjelsen af at starte mødet her. For nu er det nemlig årstiden igen, hvor det er tid at mødes og tale om museumsformidling i alle dets magt. Og det har vi de sidste 3 år nu gjort sammen med museumsformidling faglige indhold. Før var det en mere autonom gruppe, der tog sig af det, men vi synes, det var så oplagt at bruge MID, som i forvejen har det som hovedtema i sit organisationsarbejde, til at hjælpe os med det. Og der har selvfølgelig været talrige temaer igennem årene, de her 48 år. Spændende aktuelle temaer, der var lige nøjagtigt i tidsånden at tage op. Og de er så blevet endevendt af både danske og i en årrække også af adskillige udenlandske, og dermed også noget dyre oplægsholdere. Jeg skal lige sige, at det er faktisk kun 3 år siden, at vi til de her møder modtog 300.000 i støtte om året fra Kulturstyrelsen for at subsidiere både deltagerpris, men ikke mindst for at give mødet en international profil. Sådan er det ikke mere. De penge er væk. Men jeg synes såmænd, vi selv i Danmark formår at sætte de standarder, der skal til, der sagtens gør, at vi kan måle os med, hvad vi måtte ellers finde af interessante internationale oplægsholdere. Det vil I stifte bekendtskab med i det fine program, vi nu skal til at igennem. Og jeg vil da lige bemærke, at vi har sådan tit tendens til at kigge ud af. Nogle gange skal vi også kigge ind af. Altså, vi har nomineret til European Museum of the Year Award i kredsen her i dag, i øvrigt også Kongernes Jelling. Ragnarok har været indstillet til den pris. Den gamle by Aarhus fik specialprisen ved det samme. Tirpitz nede i Varde har vundet turismepriser. Designpriser er der vundet til Designmuseet. Og sådan kunne jeg sådan set blive ved. De danske museer klarer sig godt og gør det godt. Og alle vores mange gæster kan ikke tage fejl. Vi slår den ene publikumsrekord efter den anden. Men det betyder jo ikke, at vi ikke hele tiden skal forny os og blive bedre. Og det skulle det her selvfølgelig gerne være et eksempel på, det møde, vi holder her de næste par dage. Og i år der har arbejdsgruppen så valgt at sætte fokus på temaet museernes formidlingsstrategier. Se på, hvordan forskellige museer takler tidens stadig stigende krav om at både være nærværende og aktuelle i formidlingen. Og så bliver jeg nødt til at sige, tænk, det var faktisk også temaet for formidlingsmødet for lige nøjagtigt 18 år siden i år 2000. Der var jeg selv med til at arrangere et møde med nøjagtigt det samme tema, nemlig formidlingsstrategier. Dengang lagde vi det ind i en ramme, der handlede om, at nu var det et nyt årtusind, vi kastede os over. Hvad vil det bringe? Nu er vi altså 18 år længere henne, og som ingensinde er emnet aktuelt. For ønsker og krav til er mange, og jo flere aktiviteter og events vi skal favne alle sammen, ja, jo skarpere så skal vi være på de overordnede strategier. Alle museerne øger de her år. Men det nye er her, at I får en drink i hånden. Det lyder sgu da dejligt, synes jeg selv. Det er et af de nye formidlingstiltag, jeg selv forventer mig rigtig meget af. En nyudvikling, som jeg tror, der vil falde i jeres allesammens smag. Vi prøver også i år, fordi forholdene er til det, at have vores marked, der er her i morgen. Det her lille setup, for dem af der ikke ved det, hvor vi samler nogle erhvervsdrivende, som sælger varer ind til museerne herude i foyeren, hvor de kan præsentere deres udbud. Bakke op om initiativet. Det er med til at bare give en lille fli af penge til, at vi kan drive det her, som vi gør. Vi deler provenyet og arbejdet med museumstjenesten oppe fra Lysgård. Dem vil I se i morgen, når de dukker op. Men bakke op om det. I kommer til at spise frokosten lige hen over deres stande. Ja, og igen i år, som jeg nævnte, så er det nu en fasttømret og god tradition, at vi bruger MID museumsformidlere i Danmark. Og det er dejligt at kunne byde dem velkommen, MID-folkene, med at sige tak for endnu et utrolig flot, kompetent fra Mosgaard, Miele Kilde fra MX, Henrik Selv fra Naturhistoriske Museum i Aarhus og Birgit Petersen fra Aarhus, Anja Høgh fra Vardemuseerne, og så i øvrigt en gruppe omkring dem, der har stået for at lave det her arbejde. Derudover er der selvfølgelig også grund til at sige tak til Nikolaj Vestergaard Hansen, som styrer al teknik, sidder nede bagved nu, i samarbejde med Rune Clausen, som optager herfra til senere udsendelse, og så til ODM's eget lille team. Men de får deres løn for at være her. En stor tak til indsatsen til jer alle, og jeg synes, vi skylder jer, specielt midfolkene, en klapsalve. Og med de her ord, Henrik Selv, næstformand, med i bestyrelsen for MID.
jeg rent faktisk kasserer i MID. Jeg tror nu ikke, det er det, der berettiger mig til at stå her. Men jeg erstatter Michael Gyldendal, fordi han er forhindret i at være her i dag. Og vi er jo meget glade for samarbejdet med ODM omkring det her formidlingsseminar i MID. I Museumsformidlere i Danmark laver vi jo mange initiativer i løbet af året for at styrke formidlingsnetværket. Og det er jo sådan, nu kommer der en lille kort reklametale for MID, at MID er jo en forening, hvor man er personlig medlem. Det koster 300 kroner om året, og man får blandt andet det, at man er en del af det landsdækkende netværk. Man får en studietur en gang om året, eller den betaler man så selv, men vi arrangerer den. Enten til Berlin, Stockholm, Amsterdam. I år kommer den til at gå til Warszawa i september måned, ikke som der står i bladet i oktober måned. Det kan man se mere om på vores hjemmeside. Man får 150 kroners rabat på det her seminar, ODM. Man kan deltage gratis i temadage, som bliver arrangeret forår og efterår, og så får man ikke mindst MID-magasinet, som ligger foran jer, med forskellige temaer og aktuelle artikler i. Så det vil jeg da kraftigt opfordre jer til at melde jer ind i. Der kommer en lille seddel rundt det senere, hvor man kan skrive på, hvis man er medlem. Mange er jo medlem i forvejen. Så skal jeg sige en lille smule om arrangementet, og det er jo et nyt koncept, vi har udviklet sådan på baggrund af de evalueringer, vi har fået. I det, hvis man kigger i programmet, eller hvis I har kigget i det, det har I nok, så er der nogle blomster og nogle blade. Og blomsterne, det er sådan hovedtemaerne i fælles plenum herinde. Og så kan man gå ud og vælge et blad 1 eller 2. Det er så ikke et enkimblad eller tokimblad, det fik jeg ikke igennem. Men der er et blad eller 2 blade, og de har så forskellige temaer, og nogle af dem foregår herinde. Det skal vi nok lige gøre opmærksom på, inden vi går rundt, og andre foregår inde ved siden af i lokale H. Det vender vi alle sammen lidt tilbage af, men sådan kører hele dagen i dag med de her 3 blomster. Er der andet? Jo, og så har vi en stram tidsplan, og jeg kan se, lige nu er jeg på on schedule stadigvæk, så derfor når vi har kaffepauser og sådan noget, så må I gerne komme ind her, fordi ellers falder det hele fra hinanden, og så kan det godt være, at vi bliver forsinket af snevejret, men så kommer jeg overhovedet ikke hjem i morgen før en gang i morgen aften. Er der andet? Er der noget, jeg har glemt at sige? Nu kigger jeg over på mine medkompetenter herovre. De hvide sedler, det er nemlig rigtigt. Godt, Lene. Der ligger sådan nogle hvide sedler her, som hotellet har lagt ud, og det er fordi, de åbenbart skal have jeres privatadresse. Så den vil vi gerne bede jer om at udfylde jeres navn og adresse og privatadresse og sådan en underskrift. Og alt det andet behøver I ikke, e-mail og sådan noget. Det vil være en helt frivillig sag at gå ind til. Dem der skal overnatte her. Ja, det er kun dem, der skal overnatte her. Godt. Ja, og I afleverer dem, når I får nøglerne, og så får I nøglen. Ikke mere dertil. Og så vil jeg gerne introducere dagens seminarets første taler. Hvad her? In English, I would like to introduce the first speaker at this seminar, Juliette Fritsch, something like that. She's a new employer at the Naturhistoriske Museum in Copenhagen, Statens Naturhistoriske Museum, and is head of exhibition and visitor research at that place. And you're from Canada, as I know. Where?
I'm English.
You are English. Yeah, French. Okay, that could be Canada, but it's not. She'll speaking in English, and we have 45 minutes. If you stop a little before, we can have questions from the audience. So I'll leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Right, good morning everybody. Can you hear me? Did I flick the switch properly? So first of all, I want to thank the organisers for inviting me. I am quite new in Denmark, so I'm really sorry about my Danish. It's not very fluent, so please bear with me. I'll speak English. As Henrik says, I'm English originally and French, and I'll talk a little bit about me to begin with after the introductory bit. because I'm going to speak today from the perspective of the Natural History Museum of Denmark, but also from my own professional experience over the last 20 years. And I'm going to give some ideas of things that I think are interesting and that I hope you agree are interesting, and then also some practical strategies that I have found useful. Some are old, some are new, some will be familiar, some not, hopefully. And I will try and definitely leave enough space at the end for questions, because one of the reasons why I was really happy to be invited was because I would love the opportunity to meet my colleagues. So my name's Dr. Juliette Fritsch, and I'm actually head of exhibitions and visitor experience, and that's a new position at the Natural History Museum of Denmark. And I will talk a bit more about where the museum is, because the headline is that it's undergoing huge transformation at the moment, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with that headline, but what it means in practice is a whole other thing. And I most recently have been living and working in North America, which may be where the Canada thing came in. Although, because I have French nationality as well, so it's very confusing. But I've been living and working in North America in a museum just outside of Boston called the Peabody Essex Museum, and that museum is undergoing huge transformation at the moment, and one of the smaller projects that I worked on there was a $30 million new education centre and temporary exhibition space. Before that, I worked for many years at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and I was part of the future plan team, so we transformed that museum. And before that, I worked in various cultural heritage. I worked for historic royal palaces, I worked for English heritage. So I've worked with all kinds of collections. The Peabody Essex Museum has a very strong natural history collection, but the V&A Museum is the National Museum of Art and Design for the UK. So I've worked with all kinds of collections, all kinds of museums really, but one thing I seem to be doing a lot of, and that I seem to enjoy, even though each time I do it I say never again, is these big transformative projects. And there's just something really interesting about them, and I'll talk a bit more about that today. But first of all, who is the Natural History Museum of Denmark? And maybe most of you are familiar with this, but I have to say, as a new transplant to Copenhagen, many conversations I have with people are a little bit fuzzy about what the Natural History Museum actually is. But it brings together 4 different institutions who have a very historied background, and that's all kind of debatable about when things were founded, because there's when things were founded as an idea, when they were founded as a real kind of organization, when they came to their present locations. So the Botanical Gardens, the current ones weren't founded in 1600, but there were previous ones. So it's a complex organization. It's part of Copenhagen University. It's one of only 3 national museums, so it's a big, there's a whole thing that goes with being a national museum. It has a huge collection, and one of the things that's interesting for me is that they're often referred to as specimens, which is a specific thing, particular for a different kind of collection. But it's a very, very old idea of a museum, and it has currently around 130,000 museum visitors a year, and then about 1 million visitors to the gardens. And that's a challenge, both of those, because I think it would be honest to say that 130,000 visitors a year is not as healthy as it could and should be. But the 1 million visitors to the gardens is very encouraging, but partly they're doing that because it's free and it's a nice walk in the middle of town. And so those are things that we need to think about. So we're thinking about who we will become, and then there's a whole load of stats that go with that. What you see here is a great sort of architectural cutaway of a new building that will, I don't know if I can have a pointer here, but anyway, there's a new building that we're going to be building in the grounds of the Botanical Garden. And the idea, hopefully, is that the building finishes in 2021 and we open the new exhibitions in 2022. And that will mean that there's basically a whole city block is the new museum, because there's the Botanical Gardens, and what you can see sort of in the centre of the screen here is the Victorian palm house. Behind it you can see the roofs of some greenhouses. Thank you. Perfect. Here, those are all going to come down, and the new museum will be built amongst these old polytechnic buildings, and then there'll be a huge glass dome here, and then it'll be all underground here. But there's also the whole space of the Botanical Gardens, which is this whole block. There's the Geological Museum here, and then there are other random buildings that belong to the university and that are quite interesting and aren't always open to the public, but sometimes are. Oh, there we go. So there's an observatory here, which is beautiful, but it's offices. And there's lots of laboratories here, and there will be new laboratories for museum staff as well, because the museum has a very significant research facility. And the important thing about this project that we've been trying to talk about a lot, it's easy to become fascinated by the building because it's fascinating and it's huge and it's a complex project and it's a lot of money and it's very public. But actually, this isn't about a building in the end. It's about the specimens, the collections. It's about the people. It's about the research, which is of an extremely high quality. And it's also about this new building. But, I describe all of this, but that doesn't really tell you what is the museum. What does this mean for our audiences? Here's some these aren't actual quotes, just to be clear. These are kinds of brainstorming about audiences. What kinds of things might they be thinking? I mentioned the 1 million visitors to the Botanical Gardens. A lot of people don't realise that it's actually those are research specimens that are planted into the ground. The classic challenge for natural history museums is, what is there beyond dinosaurs? One of the things that I'll talk about later that we're interested in is, what are these big issues that natural history museums and the natural science research can engage with and can engage in dialogue with our audiences, and climate change is one of them. But what does that mean for being proactive about potentially provocative topics? And then, classic things to be aware of. Is it fun for me to go to with my family? I used to like science, but I left it behind at school. I think it's a bit difficult. Or, I loved it at school and I want to do more. Can I help you? These are all things, but one thing that does come through quite a lot from both our visitor research and from anecdotal information is that people aren't really sure where the Natural History Museum is, because currently it's actually spread through different sites. And most of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with the Zoological Museum, which isn't on that city block at all. It's in a completely different part of Copenhagen. So one of the challenges we have over the next few years is, how do we build this thing physically, but how do we also build it as an idea in our audience's minds? And then how does that translate into a relationship where they come to visit, but also participate in other ways with the museum? So one of the first thing we've been thinking about is, well, what is our narrative? What is our story about the Natural History Museum? Who are we? And we need to harness that and really stimulate people, stimulate their imagination. And so there is a new director, and he's been there, I think, for about 2.5 years now, which in my experience makes a very new director. Most museum directors who I know of usually do at least a 10-year, sometimes in the States, 35 years is considered totally standard. So 2.5 years into the job is new, but what's really great about that is fresh vision. And thinking about all these things that I've just mentioned, the collections, the site, the audiences, the mission, bring it all together, make something meaningful. And I'm going to talk today about some things that I have not been present for at the museum, because I've only been there since last October, but I have engaged in similar and exercises in other museums, and I'm sure some of it will be familiar to you, but I want to bring it back and think about why do we do these things and how do we relate them to this bigger idea about narrative and imagination. So I'm going to talk about 3 strategies. One is relaunching the brand. Relaunching, debatable, could be just launching. Is there a brand? First question. Reconceptualizing what the visitor experience actually is, and then thinking about our collections and the research that really underpin the museum. But what does that mean in the modern context? And the reason why I'm thinking about that, and I want to talk about that, which is the big thing that I want to ask you to have with all their communities, both their audiences who visit, their stakeholders, their funders, the people who work there, the people who don't work there but who want to or who want to collaborate, but also this bigger thing, and it's particularly relevant for national museums and also for state-funded museums, which is, you can't just open the doors of a museum and be, hi, we're here anymore, and expect to be perceived as relevant and sustainable. And it's important to be perceived as relevant and sustainable because it's a tough landscape out there for museums. Around the world, museums have to restate their purpose and their importance and their utility for society. Of the cruise heard her book and hired her to do this. And one of the reasons why is that and she talks a lot about it subsequent to all the experiments she's been doing about what is a participatory museum, is this idea of relevance. And how do you bring people who, we're talking about 400 years worth at the Natural History Museum of Denmark, to kind of be relaxed about that. Like, well, we've been around a long time. We do good stuff. People know we do good stuff. We have lots of supporters. Great. Doesn't mean you're relevant, and it certainly doesn't mean you're still sustainable in this difficult landscape. And Nina Simon talks a lot about the art of relevance, which is bringing people outside the circle of what matters within to your circle. And it means that if you can do that, it means that you represent your particularly for a national museum, that you're representing your museum nationally and internationally, but it means that you are funded and supported by the people of the nation and of your communities. And she says, people choose every day what they think is relevant, and that leads into what they pay attention to, and that is what museums need to engage with. And it's a kind of intangible thing. It's not written down often in a museum mission statement. It's not something that you might put on your advertising material. Maybe we'll get to that point one day. It's often really hard to articulate in words, this kind of social contract that you have with people who support your museum in multiple ways. So one of the first things we've been looking at the Natural History Museum of Denmark is our brand. Do we have a brand? And I should just a note of thanks for the next few slides to Rika, who's head of communication at the Natural History Museum of Denmark, and also Jane Wentworth Associates, who have been running a branding exercise with brand. For me, personally, in my professional experience, branding, when done really well as an exercise, not as a logo type that you slap on things, but actually as a process that an organization goes through to think about what they're doing, is really useful. And it's especially important to do at moments when there are big projects or there are challenges, either internal or external. It's really important, if you can, to take the time to examine what you are doing and why. The why is so important. It helps you articulate what you are, what you want to be. The process of doing it internally, of actually taking time out from the daily grind, which, let's face it, we're all involved in, and talking to your colleagues on a kind of more philosophical level, that brings a glue that in turn affects how you all working together, and that projects outwards. And that outwards projection is very important because it can be more articulate, and then it can really drive everything that you do, and that brings in stakeholders of all kind, not just the financial kind. So it really helps with strategic focus. And so for the kind of project that we're underdoing at the Natural History Museum at the moment, it's absolutely critical. And we have just been through, so this is just what I just said, strategic priorities, internal decision-making, messaging, and it is conceptual. That's the important thing. It's not just about a nice logo. Which I think is a common misconception for people who I mean, there can sometimes be, oh God, do we have to go through branding? You know, branding has, it's like, it's kind of like branding needs to rebrand itself. Like, you know, it doesn't have a good rap, really. But I will champion it, and if done right, it's a really useful process. And this is a summary of the process that we've been doing at the Natural History Museum. Very simple. Investigating what we're doing, imagining what we could be doing, expressing that, and then evaluating. Are we doing what we said we were doing? We're only at phase 2, and we've been in this process for 18 months already. But phase 2 is critical, because that's when you start moving into expressing a strategy and thinking about how you're going to implement it. But it's so far, really what it's meant is that we've been imagining, thinking, and asking ourselves really hard questions for a natural history museum. What are natural history museums engaged in? You know, other than collecting specimens, why are we doing that? So some of the things that the staff at the Natural History Museum have been thinking about, what's wrong with the world? Like, these big questions, you know, because those are the things that outside the museum, when we talk about those people outside the circle who you are wanting to bring inside the circle, they have these big things that are motivating and driving our daily lives, the little decisions, the big decisions, and all of that translates into, fundamentally, how do you spend your time and your energy and your resources? And if you want people to be spending their time and their energy and resources at your museum, you need to think about these big things that are driving them. So in the world, these are the things that the staff at the Natural History Museum came up with, that these are the big things that are going on in the world that we think maybe we can engage with. And, you know, it's not like, hi, we're here and we can solve all your problems. But there is definitely a level of something that we can do to be a space where these things can be talked about, investigated, and maybe, and I'll talk about this a bit later, maybe turn into something more proactive. And then the Natural History Museum team, and the way that it worked was there's the outside consultancy, Jane Wentworth Associates, who some of you I'm sure have worked with. I've worked with them in previous lives. And different process. It's similar but different in every museum, which is as it should be. But there were brand champions, so it wasn't just senior people working on this, it was people from all across the museum and all different functions, thinking about, well, for the Natural History Museum, what difference can we make? Well, we can create belonging, create a sense of belonging to the natural world. We can be visible in these difficult debates about things like climate change. We can help people make informed choices when we think about what's wrong with the world, you know, this anti-intellectualism, anti-expertise thing that's going on. We can make a statement about that. We can think about podcast, contract, at hope, coming up about positive impact for change. And I put this quote here from my colleague and friend, Kelly McKinley, who is a really interesting museum thinker. She's not that well known outside the States, but I encourage you to follow her blogs and things. She's really interesting. And so she talks about social impact. She works in a museum now, which is in Oakland Museum, California, which is very, very rooted in its community. It has a really strange, wonderful, eclectic collection, but it's not like it's kind of the opposite thing to the Natural History Museum of Denmark, for example. It's not a collection that has been collected because of its academic importance, and it hasn't been collected with that kind of taxonomic rigor, and it's a very local museum. But Kelly, the way she thinks about things, and she's head of, these days she's deputy director, she's kind of head of everything as far as I can work out, but she looks after the curators, the collections, the exhibitions, big things. But what she's interested in is social impact of the museum, and she did a whole inward looking project with her team about what does social impact mean for them, and concluded this thing, it's actually, in the end, it all has to become about the effect. Positive change, great. And in some ways, not what you do or why you do it, but there has to be a driver in that. But that doesn't need to be specific. So she's sort of saying, just because we have these reasons why we do it at Oakland doesn't mean that you can't do it, because what's important is the effect of what you do. And so at the NHM, we've settled on new vision and values, and I have some leaflets that I can give out at the end. Certainly not enough for everybody in the room, but this is like hot off the press in the last 6 weeks. We have articulated a new vision, which is about inspiring, engaging, enabling people to enjoy, understand and care for the diversity of the natural world. It's about an offer that is an abundance of questions and answers. We have historic collections, we have excellent research. We want to invite everybody on a journey to explore the wonders of science and nature. We have our professional values, we strive for excellence, and then, process. And then you can kind of think, well, I put a logo on it. Isn't what you would like it to be, or that's the experience different, or you have some, like a tone of voice that's off in some way. You know, you're over here talking about positive engagement with communities and you have a tone of voice that's very academic. And, you know, these things are interesting because I come from, my background professionally is in interpretation, education and visitor research, and these are all things that we've all been really concerned with for a long time, and that marketing is concerned with, and communications, and sometimes there's been, you know, professional clashes about these things, because in the end it goes to what kind of knives and forks you have in the cafeteria. It's, you know, it's every little thing. It goes to I was in Berlin on the weekend and I have twin toddlers, and we went to 4 museums in 2 days, which is quite a challenge with twin toddlers. And do you know where we had an amazing experience? The Bauhaus Museum. I would never have thought on paper that would have been the place where my toddlers would have had a fantastic experience. And the reason why was the staff were so amazing with them. And I, you know, I'm happy to tell you more detail about that over lunch or something. But it was very interesting because it was so surprising, basically. So we've been talking a lot about also what is a visual identity, because going back to this branding process, you know, the beginning of a branding process is doing it for, and so back to the logo, because after all me saying, oh, it's not just about the logo, in the end the logo is important, but it's not on its own. It's actually about a visual identity, and that can go into this whole range of things, and that's the next step that we're going to be looking for the Natural History Museum of Denmark. And one of the big challenges is, of course, that we are part of the university. So you can all hang on tenterhooks to see how that works out for us. But this goes back to what I was talking about actually reconceptualizing the visitor experience, because doing the back from them will core of repeat visitors. There's also a band of like nostalgia visitors. Everyone's like, I went to the Zoological Museum as a child in the 80s, this is all a great foundation to begin building deep connections to content and experience. But actually 21st century museum visitors are really complex and demanding. Fond nostalgia isn't sustainable for a 21st century museum. Sorry, I'm just trying to see how this works. And so what we've been thinking about, well, we need to delve more into thinking about psychographic motivation, emotional relationships with the museum. And certainly it's something that when I go back to the intangible social contract, people with museums, was really, and but repeatedly, I never forget, I went to the Google headquarters in New York City. It's not, and this is forward into the future. It doesn't mean diluting science. It doesn't mean moving away from research into the collections, but it's about sustaining the visitor experience within a larger context of social interaction, of agency, of empowerment. These are things that are really big topics that we are interested in as societies at the moment, and we need to be thinking about what that means for museums. So one thing, wicked problems, which is a phrase that people use all the time. It is a real thing defined by Stanford University, actually, as a social or cultural problem that is difficult or impossible to solve for many reasons: incomplete or contradictory knowledge, the number of people or opinions involved, the large economic burden, and the interconnected nature of these problems. So wicked problems are problems that seem like you can never solve, but they're problems that you want to solve because you think they're going to change society. And climate change is one of them, or you could break it down into things like water supply for the world. I came across this quote recently. It's a bit long. I'm going to leave you all to read it. But David, it's the beginning of, he wrote a review of a book that came out last year that's called The Future of Natural History Museums. And, it's a series of essays about that, which is if you're interested. I would say you don't have to be interested in natural history things, but he's another way of thinking about this social contract, emotional engagement, taking a big wicked problem. So because I come from a learning background, I always have to have a few slides about learning theory in there, but this is something it's an oldie but a goodie is what I would say. So if you've had any interaction or read anything about museum learning theory, you'll know about affective learning, I hope. So sorry if this is old hat to you, but I think even if it is, it's worth thinking about it again, because the attributes of affective learning is key to making connections with audiences, and it's making connections about, on a kind of level of passion, right? It's not factual. It's not utilitarian. It's not about a useful way of filling the Sunday afternoon when your grandma comes. It's about passion. And affective traits are about values, attitudes, motivations, stereotypes, and feelings. All very difficult things to assess, to turn into statistics, things like that. But it's really important model to think about. And there's this kind of cycle of affective learning where you receive information, you respond to it, but that, in responding, that because you're exhibiting some kind of change, then that turns into actually valuing this information and then organizing it and internalizing it into your own value structures, and then the cycle begins again. And it's not a new theory, but it came from Howard Bloom, one of his 3 original learning domains of cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. And what it means, I think, in terms of museums and where they're going, is constantly thinking about designing experiences, be that exhibitions, galleries, programs, events, research projects, thinking about it from a way that you want to move people from being exposed to an attitude or a value, so you can tell them that this thing is important, you can tell them that this research is, and that can be, reduced to a sort of more simple thing. And this is important. I say it's reduced, I would say summarized is a better word, because what I want to just finally move into is thinking about how you work in an interdisciplinary way to achieve this, because it's back to this whole we're all in it together to achieve something. Throughout my career, I've basically worked with designers a lot, and designers don't think about learning theory. Why should they? But you can talk to them about this kind of thing that connects. And one of the things that I think is important, and this is one tool of many, I'll show you a couple of others, which is, think about from a professional discipline across the whole museum, how do the people in the museum talk to each other about what they do. Branding, going through a branding process is one way of finding out really what your colleagues do and why they do it and what their training is. But what that comes down to is not just professional respect and trust, but also really more harmonious working. So this is one tool that I've used. I can work with graphic designers and talk them through this in 5 minutes, and it's much easier because it's quite hard to go into a meeting and say, I want the whole organization to be about feelings. You have to break it down a bit. I want us to have time to talk, so as usual I've over-prepared, but I just want to link all of this to interpretation strategy. And 20 years of working in interpretation, I still find it really difficult to succinctly articulate what interpretation is, which is ironic given that interpretation is about communication. But it's really about telling stories in a meaningful way. It's also about expressing key values of an organization, back to the branding, and it's also about inviting discussion. And there's a typo in there, but discussion of, we museums, we collect all these objects. Why do we do it? Why do we do it? We have to make the case for that. It's not just about saying we research it and the stuff we do is important. You have to connect with people. So that can mean reassessing the role of the collections and what that means. Why do we collect? We have 14 million specimens in our collection. Why are we collecting more? And every museum I've worked at, every single museum or cultural institution I've worked at, there's been 80% of the collections have been in stores, and that's always been an issue. But we still carry on collecting. Why do we do it? We need to not just tell ourselves why we do it, but we need to talk to our constituents and our audiences about why we do this. Now, with the Natural History Museum of Denmark, which I think is not unique to NHM Denmark, there has been a tendency to think about access to the collections as meaning access for research purposes. But one of the things that we're really hard at work at the moment as the vision for the new museum takes place is redefining our understanding of access to include this wider range, wider philosophy of intellectual, social, emotional, physical access, looking at how collections are prioritized for use, criteria for curatorial care, rethinking what a star object means, and then how do you communicate that to people. The new exhibitions and galleries that we're designing, we're thinking about different layers of engagement, a sort of factual layer, a participatory social layer, and how all of that combines to spark wonder and emotional engagement. So we have all these new exhibitions and galleries, in theory, but we had to start really, one of the things I first had to do when I came here was to really worked with people and have lots of conversations across the organisation about what do you think an exhibition is. And we've come to this definition, and I think what you might notice is that it's pretty loose. It's something that can appear in many different locations to a whole kind of engagement. And importantly, NHM Denmark, it also includes research projects that occupy some kind of public realm in some way. Because how we move forward and integrate that kind of academic research function with the public museum side of things is absolutely critical. I'm going to skip through these and talk generally about what this means for designing experience. And I think, basically, and this is my thing that I really cannot stress enough from all the experience that I have, and I think it's really important to have an integrated team that comes from different areas of museum and also different kinds of expertise and interdisciplinary backgrounds. And, that moves away. When I first started working in museums, it was very much the curator has the idea, basically designs it on the back of an envelope and gives it to a designer to execute. And then at the end, the education people come in. And I really want to stress that I think to achieve everything we want to at NHM, we don't work like that now. We are definitely not going to continue to work like that, but we really need to strengthen that cohesive process. I don't know where that extra N came from, but I'm just going to move through a quick few tools. I was talking about, well, how, the background that I come from, I'm not going to spend every project doing a 3-week immersive experience with the team about, the different theories of learning styles. But it is important to have some quick tools to hand to think about that act as a framework. You may agree with them, you may disagree with them, but the important thing is that you talk about them and you think about them and you think about how that frames your work. So this is one version where you talk about analytical learners versus common sense learners versus experiential. You can think about, what does interactivity mean? It doesn't necessarily mean pressing a button to find out more information. That's about as interactive as turning the pages of the book. So this is what are the tools about putting things in a case and giving them a label? It's about storytelling, thinking about attention mapping. Where is relaxation going to happen? Art museums particularly always talk about contemplation modes, but contemplation doesn't have to be always quiet. There are kinds of active ways of contemplating things. Immersion is a big thing. I'm sure we could do a whole other day on that. Digital and multimedia as well. And multisensory and also juxtaposition. So I'm going to finish by showing you this slide again. Because one of the things that Peter, the directing to nature through research, and it's about people and ideas. Thank you.
Nikolaj. Nå, I har den der. Vil du sætte mig på den her?